My name's Reuben Cox. We're at Old Style, a brick and mortar guitar shop in Los Angeles. Had the good fortune of growing up in a log cabin out in the woods in western North Carolina, a tiny town called Highlands. You know, where I grew up, it's very rural, so it's like you're always kind of like overreaching to try to kind of occupy yourself and find things to do, and then got really into music as like a window to the outside world or the world beyond my highly provincial existence. Punk rock and indie music before it's called indie music, I guess, you know, the holy trinity of the Smiths, Cure, and REM, you know, the Joy Division, Echo, and the Bunnymen. So that's kind of how like music opened up for me at a pretty interesting time in independent music. When I was about 16, I got an acoustic guitar, and it quickly became apparent that I had no musical talent, which was really a bummer. But at least I had the good sense to know and accept that, which sometimes people don't. And then when it came time to apply to colleges, I learned about Cooper Union in New York, as well as some other art schools. And so I applied to Cooper Union and got in. And that brought me to New York. It's this landscape of guitar shops and record stores, and you know, it was like, I moved to New York in 1990, and it was like cheap and dangerous and fun. I was always interested in guitars as objects and music made with guitars. And when you're in art school, they teach you how to use table saws and drill presses and band saws and stuff like that. And then after I graduated, I worked as either a tech or a teacher at Cooper Union, and also Sarah Lawrence up in Westchester and Bronxville. And so I had access to wood shops at two different places. And so as a hobby, I learned how to build a certain kind of like hollow body electric guitar. And just as a hobby with no pretensions of turning it into a business or a shop or a career or anything like that. And then in around 2009, I was in New York, and my then wife, who works for a record label, was asked to start up a West Coast office here in Los Angeles. So I was the tag-along spouse and had to give up my whatever setup I had in New York and figure it out, you know, from scratch. And I was really tired of students. When I was a teacher, if I had students that were working and participating, I was a really good teacher. And if they weren't doing shit, I was, you know, and they weren't making photographs or doing anything, I had really nothing to say, and I was a really bad teacher, you know. So I just got tired of that and institutional politics, and kind of on a whim had this idea of like starting a guitar shop. And with no experience in retail or no experience doing basic setups or repairs and stuff like that. So I just decided to go for it at like one of the worst times in American history to start a small business. You know, 2009, got a lease on this place in 2010, and just kind of, you know, Forrest Gumped my way. The earliest revelations were like sheer terror. I got the lease in March of 2010, and then on April Fool's Day of 2010, opened up the shop, and this dude wanders in with like trench coat, greasy, stringy hair, pentagram necklace, you know, just direct from Central Casting. And I'm like, he just walked in, there was the open sign. I'm like, oh, the first person to walk in. It's like, hi. He's like, hi, I'm John. And I guess I didn't hear him well. I was like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, John, like a toilet. And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. You know, just in retail, anyone can walk through the door. You know, you're a sitting duck. And I was very, very bad at dealing with the great unwashed coming into the store and trapping me in conversation, or they'd see an aux cable coming out of the stereo and they want to play me some horrible recording of their niece who sounds just like Janis Joplin. And in addition to that, there's a lot of amazing people, and people would come in and like see that there was this thing, and they were like, okay, I've got this like guitar that you know, let's let him try or whatever. I'd never done setups or anything before, and I like did it okay, and then like they would bring their nicer guitar in, and just I had no idea what to charge or anything like that, and it just, no advertising, all word of mouth, no capital. no business expertise, and just kind of went for it. And I guess I'm like a modernist at heart. I just kept working. I've had an allergy to hard work, so I just kept like making guitars and learning, nervously watching YouTube videos and, to learn how to do this stuff, so. And yeah, the business survived,
A number of years ago when I had a good friend who worked here, and I would just come hang for 6 hours at a time. And one day Reuben said, "Do you want to just work here?" And it was the easiest job I've ever gotten in my entire life. Thought there'd be an interview, but got it. I think when, upon kind of return to the store, if you will, a lot of customers, they come in the first time with a very almost high fidelity-esque idea of what a guitar shop might be. And that's hilarious. But anytime people come in, I'm like, people are almost scared to play guitar. And I say, listen, Reuben doesn't know how to play guitar. And I just don't care enough about what you sound like. So like, make yourself at home. And then when they come the second time, they definitely turn it up a little louder.
A lot of the aesthetic here in the shop is an homage to like weird shops that I've known and loved. And just this simple idea, if you want to open up a shop, it's really easier than you think it is. And you can sell like whatever you want. I could sell empty tubes of toothpaste here, and it's legal, Having the guitars in the shop set up was something that I just assumed that one did. And that, I assume there was others doing it around 2010, but I think less so. I think a lot of like hole-in-the-wall guitar shops like this across America, you would go in, it used to be the scene where you'd go in and there'd be a guitar and they'd be like, oh, it's this much. And if you want it to actually play well, you can pay extra and we can fix it up for you. So, but I just assumed that, if you wanted to sell something, you have to like really dial it in, So everything gets worked on before it goes out. One thing that came into focus in the early days of the shop, where women who are in bands or learning guitar come in, and you could tell they have this total PTSD from being treated like shit in guitar shops by these dumbass bros, It's happened many times where women have come in and they have this, tightness in their shoulders. And it's like, it's cool, you're safe here. I'm not gonna mansplain, where to plug the cable into the amp or whatever, So since I didn't do any like advertising of any kind, and just for the fun of doing it, would have people do in stores, like impromptu. There was no like, calendar to fill or anything. It would just kind of happen when it would happen. And the shows have always been great. Like Kurt Weill has played here, Aldous Harding, Andrew Bird played a show here. Lots of really interesting people have played here. And it was like a really effective way of getting people in who didn't know about the shop. The room is like, it has a really good sound. Just vocals would be through a PA and like guitars would just come out of the amplifiers and stuff like that. So it's kind of lo-fi, hi-fi. But yeah, there's like a real community of people who come through the shop, and it's like a really warm vibe. And I'm really happy to be kind of enmeshed in that with all these, wonderful people that I'm surrounded with. It quickly came into focus with the shop that there's like a lot of people in LA, they already owned their conventionally attractive sounds or whatever. Like they had their nice Telecaster, their nice whatever. Everyone's looking for new sounds. And I feel like I tapped into it with the help of people coming through and suggesting that, or being into like new things. I've had like done a lot of interesting stuff with like Mark Nishida, who's famous for playing with Beastie Boys. Like he would be very Miyagi-like in his way, would like drop off something and he's like, oh, you should take a look at this. Because he's very restless and trying to find new sounds and do things. So, or like he'd had like a 60s Teisco guitar that he turned into a Cuban trace. He's like, this is something, you should do that. Someone will want to buy that. Or like modding things or different pickups or whatever. He was great. He's sort of like the fairy godmother to the shop in a lot of ways, in the earliest days of the shop, and like saying, this is, people are looking for other sounds.
I think the beauty of old style is it's almost everything the other guitar shops don't have. So I always tell people you want a guitar that no one else has. And old style kind of provides that, almost like an instrument that can match your uniform or become part of your uniform. And I mean, I'm playing a Zap Les Paul. Like, what the hell is that? Like, that's the cool part about the store. They come here looking for something that isn't a Strat or a Tele or isn't this, that, and the other. And they leave with a 1960s Japanese Teisco with a new bridge and new tuners, or they leave with a Frankenstein fake Stratocaster, and most often with a rubber bridge guitar.
Did a bunch of things with like Blake Mills, like we were like trying these like weird piezo pickups in the bridges of guitars and trying things, and they, those were like, nothing ever really happened with that. And then was photographing at a session at Sound City, and Andrew Bird on a record that Blake Mills was working on with him, and he had this banjo from the 50s made by Harmony that had this removable part that like gave it the rubber bridge sound, a plunky sound. It was so like to like approximate the sound of a banjo, before decent pickups for banjos existed, for live use or something like that. And I heard it and it was like one of the coolest sounds I'd ever heard.
I was having dinner with Blake Mills and my sister, and I'd just gotten broken up with, and my sister was consoling me, and Blake said, "Here, check out this guitar," and handed me what I later found out was the prototype rubber bridge guitar that Reuben had built. I found it peculiar, and it was just an electric Tele body, and I said, I don't get it. He said, plug it in. And I did, and I went, ooh, okay, now I get it. And understood completely why he's used it for 10,000 hours, on every record.
I guess the first time it appears on a record is on the Perfume Genius record, No Shape, a song called Valley. And it's also like just such a great record. If you haven't heard it, you should listen to it, not just because of that guitar, but because it's a great record. It appears on a couple Taylor Swift things. There's a Wilco record, Ode to Joy, which is like they're all over it, which is like incredible to me. The kind of secret combination, or not so secret, not secret at all combination for rubber bridge guitars is the deadness of flat wounds. And the go-to, I always use these D'Addario 11s as the starting point. The woody sound of those strings and the rubber bridge, which gives it a dead sound. The acoustic ones, they have like a Duncan style, like Hot Rails pickup in it. So like a hot shredder pickup. So you get like some clarity to it. It doesn't get too muffled, Being in a Whole Foods and hearing a song that I've never heard before, and I'd be like, oh, I made that guitar, and it's like, that's kind of incredible, Or Blake uses a rubber bridge guitar on a Bob Dylan song, and it's, it's like, it's hard to beat that, So, but also seeing people like really inspired by the guitars, I've found that more often than not, just changing to a different kind of strings on your guitar can make it happier, or you have happier with your guitar, like lighter gauge or heavier gauge, or like there's like silk and steel strings, or like 12-string silk and steel strings sound amazing. Or try flat wounds on your guitar, or it usually is like more effective in voicing a guitar than changing pickups oftentimes, or unless you're doing like a really radical pickup change. And also, if you don't like the way it sounds, you're maybe out $10 or something, and you can try something else or go back to the strings that you've been using before. So like just as an offhand comment Mills was saying, oh yeah, try have baritone on this thing. So went to the D'Addario website and like, what am I going to do? I don't have a long neck thing here. So and I saw that there's like one set of 7-string flat wounds on the D'Addario website. And so I was like, oh, I'll just lose the high E and I've got this set. And so you have to do a little filing on the nut, but you know, your guitar sounds radically different. The E standard rubber bridge thing was figured out. Then I was just being restless and like, well, what else can we do? I did like a baritone version, a 12-string version, like a mini bass, converting like tenor guitars into a mini bass tuned BEAD as well with heavier strings. Yeah, I've had D'Addario strings in the shop since day one. They've been in the shop for over 15 years now.
I think people right now are specifically looking for odd and different guitar tones. I think we're a little less interested in 10-gauge nickel wound on a Strat, which is great, but I think old style has made baritone guitars and the 7-string set an extraordinarily relevant product, and I think my most Googled thing at this point is D'Addario 7-string set, so I can show customers what they're looking for when they ask me about it.
It's extremely gratifying, you know, to see people inspired or like people buying a guitar and, you know, bump into them a week later and they say, oh, all these songs popped out over the weekend. Anything that I've done here in the shop that's interesting or that the shop is known for is the direct result of a collaborative effort from people coming through the shop. There's nothing that I've done that I've pulled out of thin air. You know, it's all generous spirits coming through the shop.